Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute, and with me is Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems.
What percentage of leaders in your career would you work for again? The typical response is less than 27%. That means most of us wouldn't work for them again. But then there are those memorable leaders who have inspired us and moved us to want to work with them again. They leave footprints of success we can all learn from. What makes these leaders memorable? Find out as Scott and I meet with sales leadership expert Floyd Carlson on episode 560 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm excited to hear more about Floyd. I've known Floyd for many years and always inspired by his presentations. But before we get to Floyd, no book club. So next week, again, we're going to continue.
Before we get to Floyd, nothing.
Before we get to Floyd, just this
we're going to not do something
that we don't have a book club today. So the book is What Great Salespeople Do. Next week, we'll be doing chapter 10, The Storyable Organization. And then keep in mind, after we finish this book, which is going to be in a couple episodes, our next book is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I'm sure everybody's heard of that by Dale Carnegie. So be sure to pick up that book and be ready, because Bill and I are going to go through that cover to cover. So what do we got in store with Floyd, Bill?
Well, Floyd is an executive and team coach who enables leaders to lead consciously and intentionally so they can build highly effective and engaged teams. He has 30 years of leadership experience. He's passionate about developing people so they can be and create the positive impact they want to enable in their organizations. Floyd's broad international experience working in Europe allows him to relate to and bring new perspectives to support his clients. His experience covers roles in IT, corporate sales, leadership development, sales operations, crisis management, and leading change management teams. And as a military veteran who is Ranger qualified and commanded 2 infantry companies in the 101st Airborne. Welcome to the Winning at Selling podcast, Floyd.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Bill and Scott. So happy to be here. Did I cut in where someone was?
No, that's great. I like that you're Ranger qualified because you can kick the SEALs' butts, right? And Delta Force, they're not quite as good as Ranger.
Yeah, it's one of those things. We all have that professional courtesy, and I've had a chance to actually work with the Navy SEALs in some operations in Panama. Wow, what an amazing organization! We can learn a lot, about leadership just watching how they operate together.
Yeah, what a team that has to work together flawlessly, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. It's leadership, but it's also trusting each other. And some of these themes are going to be things that we're going to talk about today as we go through some of the questions about, what actually does make a memorable leader.
Well, you mentioned, we mentioned in the opening that less than 25% of people feel their leaders positively influence them. Why are so many leaders just ineffective in what they're doing?
Well, there's quite a few things around what gets in their way. Some leaders, when they take over, they have this mindset of, well, I'm just a manager. I'm just here to do certain things. And they don't really step into that role of being a leader. Matter of fact, I've worked with some and coached some of these leaders where their effectiveness is, gosh, I just do this piece, which is really managing and administration versus actually leading. So that's like one of the first things is there's a mindset shift that has to happen when a person steps into that leadership. They have to take that ownership and say, hey, I'm definitely going to be the leader here. The other thing that really gets in a lot of leaders' way is this thing I call limiters, which I write about in my book, Conscious Leadership in Action. In there, limiter can be a belief, it can be a habit, it can be, something from our past that we may be conscious of, we may not be conscious of, and it continues to get in our way. I have a number of examples of this, limiting beliefs such as I'm not enough, I don't have the confidence. I'm working with quite a few leaders today just around how do we build their confidence, so that they can step authentically into being a leader. They don't know how to manage their energy. A lot of them have never seen actually how to do it differently. A lot of times, I've had leaders work for me and I'd ask them, hey, where did you learn how to do this? Like say performance reviews. well, this is how my first manager did it with me.
Mm-hmm.
So guess what? They pick up those habits, and I say bad habits,
Right.
and they actually bring those along with them as they go through their career. But no one ever gives them the feedback or shows them a different way. So they kind of stay in this mediocrity, and thus they become one of those leaders that is like, yeah, they're okay, but were they memorable? Absolutely not.
Let me ask you a question on that, because you talked about some people are managers and some people are leaders, and I think a lot of businesses conflate those two things. They see those two things as being one and the same. What would you say is the difference between a manager and a leader?
Well, the first thing, is definitely this mindset. A leader is somebody who is taking full responsibility of what their team does and doesn't do. All those aspects of leading by example. They are making the connections with their people. They're not only looking out for them, which is being conscious and intentional, but they're also, looking at where are we going? So all those aspects of strategic visioning, things like that are part of that. Where a manager, where they typically focus on is, and this is kind of like the old school definition of leadership, is just kind of orchestrating how people do their work. I'm administrating, the paperwork such as leave requests and things like that. And I'm just trying to orchestrate the work. Matter of fact, in a recent podcast, and this comes from Adam Grant, he was talking about this, where, the leader today actually has to be so much more. It's no longer is about just, managing people's work. We have to be a counselor, we have to be, a psychologist, we have to be all these other things. So leadership in today is even getting more difficult. Mm-hmm. So we as leaders, how do we, prepare ourselves, step into this and constantly sharpen our saw, something from Covey's book, The 7 Habits.
Right.
That's what I see is the difference, that administration versus somebody actually stepping out and being the leader. Sometimes I have to lead from the front, sometimes from the side, sometimes from the rear.
So I don't have to have the position to lead.
Absolutely not. Matter of fact, one of the paradigms I teach as part of one of the programs that I deliver is leadership belongs to the team. Anybody can lead. We tend to sit there and focus that leadership is the person who has the title. Matter of fact, Robin Sharma's book, which I loved, The Leader Without a Title, is an incredible lot of examples about how every one of us can be a leader in what we do. So absolutely, it doesn't require a title, and anyone can be a leader. We just have to step into it consciously and intentionally.
It reminds me, I think I was reading A Citizen Soldier by Stephen Ambrose. And I think in that, and again, this is just part of your military background, but he said one of the differences between the U.S. military and the German military in World War II was when a sergeant went down, somebody else in the U.S. military, the corporal would pick it up, or a private would pick up leadership and keep going. And in the Germans, because of their strict rules, if the sergeant got shot, everybody just sat around and did nothing, because they were waiting for that authority leader to come in and do something. And I think businesses sometimes do the same thing. When the manager's gone, we just kind of wander around aimlessly and not know how to lead ourselves.
Absolutely. Again, they haven't been shown a different way. So as a leader, how do we build that resiliency into our team members so that each of them can actually step up? You're absolutely right, Bill. One of the Ranger creeds is, though I be the lone survivor, I will accomplish the mission. That goes down to the lowest person. And we practice this and we train this. If your leader is no longer there, you need to step up and continue to do the mission. But that's part of our training. And so just imagine if organizations started to build training and start to focus on that, next person up, next person up. It used to be when we're developing leaders, the old paradigm is you have, 5 to 10 years to develop a leader. Nowadays, you got 6 to 12 months. That is it. The churn is so fast and we're moving so quickly. How do organizations actually build a leader quickly? We think about it from the sales leadership, Scott. How do we, take somebody and quickly get them ready to be able to step into not only where they're a great salesperson, but they're also a leader? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Right. I totally agree with you. And I think the salespeople that are listening to this podcast episode have to look at a team approach when it comes to a quota for the organization, for the department, for the company. And if the top producer that is usually generating the largest percentage of the sales is out for one reason or not. Maybe they got some family issues. Other people need to step up and they need to work on working together to complete that mission, to still deliver the results that the company needs from the entire sales team. And I just love that approach, that leadership is not a title, it's an activity that people choose to engage with, and it starts with that mindset. So I'm really grateful that you started there, because salespeople have got to have a mindset that they are a leader, and they're a leader within the company, and they're also a leader when they're engaging their prospects. So when companies hire you, Floyd, what are some of the things that they look for you to deliver to their leaders when it comes to coaching? What are some of the areas that you really concentrate on when it comes to developing leaders?
Yeah, there's like 5 things that organizations want me to come in and work with leaders on. One that is, I would say I get this one all the time, is around being able to see around corners, which is really tied also to strategic vision. Your ability not only just to focus on the here and now, but also to see what's actually happening. One of the first things I'll do with most of my clients is say, if you would show me your calendar, what am I going to see? And 98% of it is typically tactical stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I say, so where are you building in this time for you to be thinking about, in the future, or what is going to be happening? Love also, I'm going to throw out another resource here, Daniel Burris's Flash Foresight book. Matter of fact, one of my organizations, we brought him in to help leaders actually to build this mindset of, thinking, what is coming around the corner, looking at this thing called hard trends and soft trends. A hard trend would be something like, we know the computing power is going to continue to increase exponentially. But a soft trend would be, is this particular company, which could be your company, is going to last and be number one in the business or in your industry for a long time to come. That'd be a soft trend. But by looking at those trends, it can help them to start seeing around the corner. Another thing which they bring me in for is building, relationships, this thing around trust. They tend to be really good with their customers, but building trust and building relationships internally in the organization tends to actually be a challenge for some of these leaders. Developing talent is then closely tied to it. Mindset is the 4th one, which is going from being, an employee to an owner. We want you to take that ownership mindset. And you also, big one too, as we kind of touched on, those limiters. Mm-hmm. There's typically something that the person may be aware of or they're not aware of, and it's just starting to get in their way. So how can we neutralize or minimize the impact that is having on their people and on others? Those tend to be the 5 things that people bring me in for.
Oh, all great areas.
Yeah, so much of it is that vision. You talked about that earlier, that somebody has to have the vision, the larger vision of the organization, in order to step up and have leadership. So let's talk about that a little bit. How can we get that common vision and help people to see what the long-term needs of the organization are, rather than just doing my daily task right at hand?
Yeah, I love where you're going with this, Bill. And Google and Cisco studied their most high-performing teams. And in this research that they found, what makes teams the most effective out of all the teams they had, first of all, most companies don't even know how many teams they have, which is another challenge. But they found that, this percentage of people, these teams that were the best performing, the first thing is they all tied in and knew the purpose. So part of that visionary of where we're going is, what is the purpose of our organization or our team? So it's our sales team. What is our specific purpose? We tend to know some of these already, right? It's if we're not making the sales, the company doesn't survive. We are, at that front of the talon, to keep the company afloat. But really understanding that purpose of what we do, and then tying it into the company's vision. But this doesn't mean that, the company vision is just the only vision. What is our vision as a leader that we have for this team? I do a lot of work with clients on this, because it's like, well, our company vision is this. Yeah, absolutely. And as a leader of this team, what is your vision? So we start focusing on, this thing that I've learned along my way called the VISM, VSEM, vision, the strategy, the execution, and then the measurables. So actually putting it on a 1-pager. So I work with them to say, hey, vision, where are you taking this team in the next 3 to 5 years? Strategy, what are those 3 or 4 pillars that you want to focus on in the next 2 years that are going to enable that vision? Then the executables, that's all those things in the next 18 months. And then the M, the measurable, that's, what are those things that you're going to measure along the way to make sure you're actually getting it? But by having that, guess what? It becomes then a communication tool that I can sit there and communicate not only with my team members, but all my stakeholders. This is what we represent. Those leaders that take this on, what they start to find is they start building more alignment with other organizations, but also within their people, because they start to see, wow, I'm part of this. And then they actually start to feel that pride of, yeah, hey, we're the front of the talent when it comes to, sales. I understand every time I'm out there working with my customer and my clients, I'm making an impact for us to achieve this vision. I think that's where it starts from, Bill.
Is that vision? Do you find in organizations you work with that vision is muddy, that it's hard, that it needs to be refined? So often I say, we're going to be profitable and make the best product, and it's all this blah, blah that people don't really get excited about and can't see themselves being in submission to. And I use that term purposefully, that we need to be subsequent to their mission. And if I don't know what the company's mission is, how can I find my role in that mission?
Exactly, Bill. I'm smiling because I was working with one CEO and I was talking to them about this concept, and they handed me, a 20-slide deck and said, hey, here's our vision and our strategy. And I was like, wow, this is very, very detailed. How does this land when you communicate this? Well, I think they get it. Well, actually, I was talking to the people that don't really get it. So we took that 20 pages and we put it into 1 page. That ability to exactly do what you're talking about, Bill, is make it succinct, and it's got to inspire and move people. When I do goal work with people and also their personal visions, it's got to be something, and the winters here in Minnesota, it's got to be like at midnight, it's 25 below, the dog's got to go out. Your vision and your goal statements have to be that motivating that you're getting up to take the dog out when it's that cold. It's the same thing when it comes to your goal statements and your vision. What I find is a lot of them are like, nah. And it's like, hey, is this going to inspire you? Well, on a 1 to 10, how does this inspire you? Well, this is like a 4. Okay. So when things get tough, what's the likelihood you're going to do this? Not very high. So then we start working on, let's bring it up to at least 8, 9, or 10.
Yeah. And the CEO can't even say it without looking at the page either.
Oh, exactly.
So they don't even really, it's not ingrained in people as to what this vision is. And one of the things that I like to talk about when I'm working with an organization is, can I put my action up against this vision and determine if my action is the right action? I've got a tough decision to make. Can I look through the lens of the vision and say, okay, I can make the right decision because it's going to match the vision? Or is it so muddy, I still don't know what to do?
Yeah, I love that, Bill, because being able to do that, the vision and you're also the values of the organization, if those are spot on, it leaves no doubt when I'm making a decision. I can lean into my vision, I can lean into our values, and that's going to help us make a decision. Absolutely. Yeah.
Reminds me of one of my lines, Floyd, is asking salespeople, is your commitment greater than the consequences? And the consequences are, if you do not do something and you enable inaction within your culture, your organization, what would happen to you? And it's just like when a salesperson is tested and they're feeling like they're being rejected or not being successful and they're emotionally risking all the time. They have to be able to focus on a vision to be able to get through that, to be able to get a greater outcome in the future. And it's just like focusing on the commitment that they have to overcome any consequences that are going to jeopardize what they want to accomplish and the results they want to get. You've worked with a lot of memorable leaders. Is there examples that you can share with us of some situations or traits or more stories about working with leaders that can really demonstrate leadership in action?
Yeah, so there's like 10 competencies, but I'm going to talk to you about a couple of those that tend to really stick out. They all stick out, but the ones that are really top of mind for me. The first one is leaders be able to create an environment of lasting change. And let me kind of deep dive this a little bit. The first thing is they're able to give heartfelt, direct feedback in a way that inspires people to actually change. So I'm going to give you a personal example of this. I was, so when you asked that question to start off the show, Bill, about how many leaders would you work for again? My career of 30 plus years, there's 5, which means I'm lower than that 27%. And one of them I'm talking to you about right now. We were in Switzerland together. This is when I was living and working in Europe, and we were having dinner, and he looked at me and as a great leader, he goes to me, he says, Floyd, when I look at you, you have all the skills and you have all the talent. And yet I don't understand why you're not going to the next level yet. And I work with a personal coach. So that's another thing I'm going to talk about is people constantly are developing themselves. And my personal coach had 2 questions that they suggest that I ask you. One is, do you really want it? And 2, do you feel worthy? I was floored. Here I am. I'm having dinner with my boss, and all of a sudden, these are pretty profound, deep questions. Now, the thing of it is, though, I looked in the mirror, I got back to my hotel and I said, gosh, the answer to both of those is no right now. But thank goodness that leader gave me that feedback and had that discussion. They had the courage to have that discussion with me. Because once they did that, then I was able to say, hey, is that the answer I want? Is that the answer I want to be giving? Is no to both of those. So I started doing the work. I went deeper, and guess what? Because of that catalyst that leader gave me, 6 months later, I'm moving to the next level. I get the promotion. So it just goes to show that this leader is able to create this lasting change because they're able to put themselves out there. They're able to manage their fears. They have this courageous authenticity. And also there's a different paradigm. They look at conflict. They look at it as it's information. Rather than why is this person doing this to the other person, they're looking at it from this lens of what's trying to merge here. It's a different way of looking at it, but they use that. They challenge the status quo. They go to those difficult places. So that's one. The second one is, they continue to do the work on themselves. So they have a coach. They are continually, investing in their development. They're constantly reading. They're doing different things to continue to sharpen their saw. And part of that is they build these habits, these success routines that support them to be able to do that. Yeah, and one final point is they build trusting relationships in that environment. Talk about a trait that is incredibly important. It is being trustworthy. And so they do those actions. One of the key actions is they listen. They listen to their people. They respond to their people. They demonstrate they care. They have the competency. They also, their word is their bond. They actually follow through. When those things are there, those leaders become memorable. So it's 3, Scott, of the 10.
Yeah.
So as we close up here, we're kind of coming to the end, Floyd, of our time, but we have a lot of listeners that are salespeople. They're out in the trenches. How can they continue to grow? What should they do to build their leadership ability so they can lead from the middle or behind or wherever?
Yeah. Hey, Bill, I love this question. And this could probably be a 5-hour program on this one, which we don't have is that on a time. I'm going to start with something, simple here. It's about, start with yourself when it comes to how do you manage your energy? Right now, a lot of us are so time famine. It's no longer about time management, it's about attention management. And so what happens is they're so stressed out and they got so many things going on. Going back to that, looking at their calendar, they're so focused on the tactical. Start managing your energy. A couple ways of doing this. One is this thing called an energy audit. And what this means is list all the people, places, thoughts, beliefs that you have in the first column. The next 2 columns, you're going to look at each one of those. So if I was looking at my boss, the column next to it is, am I getting a energy deposit? And the next column is withdrawal, and do a percentage of 100%. So if I'm with my boss, is it 60% deposit, 40% withdrawal? Then the 4th column is just take some notes. What are you noticing about that? What comes up? What is actually draining you? Once you have all this list completed, just take a look at it and go, okay, what themes am I seeing? What's one thing I can do with one of these each week that's going to start to make a difference? if they can start focusing on their energy and build habits. When I say habits, I'm going to lean into, the Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. He has this thing, it's called Savers, which is silence, affirmation, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. He has this power hour of where he does that to prepare himself for the day.
Mm-hmm.
Start doing that as a sales leader or a person wanting to be a sales leader, managing your energy, and just start to see what happens, because now you're going to have that energy that's going to sustain you to be able to do those great things as a leader throughout the day.
Super. Thank you.
Great. One question that I always like to ask our guest, Floyd, is what book or person has had the greatest influence on your life or career?
Well, I've named so many so far in here.
Yeah, you have.
Yes, if I had one book that I would recommend to people, it's going to be The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in this book, it talks about our zone of excellence and our zone of genius. And a lot of people are going to try to keep us in our zone of excellence, but it's that zone of genius, when we lose track of time, when we're in that flow state. When we are there, we are truly at our best.
Mm-hmm.
Also in there's this chapter called Einstein Time. Literally, I tingled 3 days after reading that, which basically says time and pressure is a human concept. And once you realize that, you have all the time in the world to do those important things of being a leader.
Wow. I've got that book. It's got the goldfish jumping out of the goldfish bowl on the cover. Yeah. I read that book. Great book.
He's got a lot of books he hasn't read.
Yeah. There's a lot of ones that I haven't read that I have. But anyway.
Wow. This has been inspiring. Thank you, Floyd. We appreciate your time. Any resources that you can make available to our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll list some of the books, that I have here. And again, listen to that piece around the energy audit. Really encourage everybody to do that. I work with that with every one of my clients. We're working on that just to see where they're at with it. And it is a great aha for them when they start seeing what's giving them the deposit, what's giving them the withdrawal. Yeah,
that sounds very powerful. So, Scott, any other resources that you have as we close up today?
I would really like to encourage our listeners to learn more about PSA. Bill and I have been involved with that group for many years. Bill's the current president. PSA is the Professional Sales Association. You can find out more information about the group at psamn.org. We have monthly meetings, and we do broadcast them via Zoom. So you can attend and be there with everybody else during that time. So check it out, psamn.org.
And very affordable. And so we have great speakers. What do you have? I've got one more opportunity to do the 7 Deadly Sins of Selling presentation. I had 4 of them that I was giving away. I have one more available. If you have a company or if you have an organization of salespeople that you want to have some new ideas, it's about 45 minutes long. If you're in the Minneapolis area, I'll come and do it live. Otherwise, if you're further away, I'll do it via webcast. But the 7 Deadly Sins of Selling, a lot of fun.
Great program. Our golden nugget today is Growth and Comfort Do Not Coexist by Jeannie Rometty, who's the former CEO of IBM.
Yeah, I think that really ties into what Floyd was talking about with if we're going to do something to create ourselves as leaders, you've got to make some change. You've got to do something different. And that growth can be painful because like the questions that Floyd was asked, you got to look in the mirror and say, what am I really doing to myself here? And what do I want to do? So great quote, Scott. Ties in really well. All this information is going to be at winningatselling.com. Winningatselling.com. Go there for the show notes.
Next week, we're going to be covering chapter 10 from the book. Again, storyable organizations. And our topic is going to be mastering resilience.
Subscribe, share the podcast with your colleagues and friends on social media. Go out and get better, one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.